Welcome to today's Core Coffee Chat on the impact of the environment on health and well-being. I'm Nicole Lezin, one of the local consultants who facilitates a countywide initiative called the Collective of Results and Evidence-Based, or CORE Investments, along with Nicole Young. We're your hosts today, and we're joined by several guests who we'll introduce shortly. As you can hear, our Core Institute events are held bilingually in English with Spanish interpretation, thanks to our team members, Stella Lauerman, who provides simultaneous interpretation and translates all of our core materials, and Gisella Carrasco, whose voice you're hearing now, who's providing consecutive interpretation and will also translate your comments and questions in the chat. Welcome, everyone. And while you're sharing your names and organizations in the chat, we'll go ahead and get started with a brief overview of CORE, and I'll turn it over to Nicole Young.
Thanks, Nicole. So I see a lot of familiar names and faces on here, so hopefully this also sounds familiar to you. CORE Investment stands for the Collective of Results and Evidence-Based Investments, and we refer to it both as a funding model and a movement to achieve equitable health and well-being in Santa Cruz County, using a results-based collective impact approach that's responsive to community needs. So I know some of you might be really familiar with it, having just recently gone through a funding process that used this CORE framework as a way to award funds to nonprofits providing services. But we also think of CORE as something much bigger than that, that really brings us together in different ways to think about how do we align our work, how do we work towards common goals. And that's a large part of what we try to focus on and spur creative thinking around in these CORE Institute events. And the evolution of CORE, which started out again as purely a funding model, that evolution from the funding model to growing into something bigger, this broader movement, has really happened and been fueled by a lot of input and insights that have been gathered from partners over the last several years. Partners from local government, from philanthropy, from nonprofits and different community groups. And so that collaborative process has led to the CORE mission and vision that you see on this slide that really focus on words like collective action and equitable opportunities, thriving, and shared responsibility. And you'll see that equity really is at the center of it all. And when we say equitable health and well-being, we mean that we want to live in a community where all people across the lifespan have equitable opportunities to experience these 8 interdependent core conditions for health and well-being. So meaning that people's opportunities and their life outcomes can't be predicted by, for better or for worse, by things like race and ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, language, any of those, what we often call equity dimensions. And so we really like to highlight how these core conditions are things that we all need. These are dimensions of well-being that need to be present, and they're very much interconnected, that what happens in terms of physical health and wellness has an impact on whether we are part of thriving families, or economic security and social mobility is very much connected to living in a safe and just community and healthy environments. And so we really try to highlight how interconnected and interdependent these are. And it's part of the reason why we're so thrilled to be featuring today's conversation about healthy environments. And when we look at these topics, if you go to the next slide, Nicole. So events like today's coffee chat are part of what we call the CORE Institute for Innovation and Impact, or CORE Institute, where this is, think of it as like the learning arm of CORE Investments, where this is our opportunity to offer an array of training, technical assistance, other learning opportunities for people, again, across sectors, across different types of organizations. We're building some shared knowledge, some shared skills and tools, and a way of thinking about how we achieve that core mission and vision. Okay, next slide, Nicole. We're going to do a quick poll here before we introduce our speakers. We want to get a sense of how familiar are you with the core conditions for health and well-being? You'll see that this is going to be a recurring theme throughout the presentation today. So are you not at all familiar, or you've heard about the core conditions, but you're not really sure what they are beyond what I just showed on that slide? Or maybe you understand the concept of the core conditions, but you're still not sure how you would actually use that in your work beyond just applying for a specific grant that requires you to make a connection there. Or are you in an agency or a collaborative that has aligned its work in some way with the core conditions? Either you've aligned your strategic goals with those core conditions, or you've applied for funding that aligns with the core conditions. Let's give about another maybe 10 seconds here to answer the poll. I see a couple more responses trickling in. Okay. I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1, and then let's take a look at what we have here. So we see somewhat of a mix here. So we have about half of you that are, a little more than half, that have some familiarity with the core conditions. Several of you that have actually aligned your work with the core conditions, so that's great news. And then some that aren't familiar with it at all, or really not sure what this is about. And so you're in the right place. We hope that by the end of today's coffee chat, you'll feel like you understand it a little bit more. And again, before I hand it off to our speakers, I just want to introduce Mariah Roberts from County Park Friends. And I think we've met Mariah through a variety of some core events and core discussions, but most recently, Mariah was part of our visual storytelling with data learning cohort, where we were in a small group and really practicing and learning about how to use data and tell stories in visual ways. And in one of our sessions, Mariah was sharing this draft of something she was working on, a draft presentation, and she was describing how a cohort or a collaborative of organizations working in the environmental sector had been meeting, long before, for a long time. But there was a point where there was a discussion about the core conditions for health and well-being, how the core conditions are a framework that the county is using for its funding. And they went through a process all on their own without any, without any prodding or nudging from Nicole and I, to really take a look at how are they doing active work in the different core conditions. And that's led to, I think, some really great discussions and realizations about how, even though they identify as organizations in the environmental sector, how really their work touches on so many of those core conditions for health and well-being. And so we are so pleased. So we saw that and we thought, Mariah, that would be a great core coffee chat topic. And Mariah and her colleagues have done a lot of work behind the scenes leading up to this to really organize and develop what we think is going to be a really interesting presentation for all of you. And so I'm going to stop talking now and hand it over to Mariah to introduce her colleagues and share with us what they've been working on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. And there we go. Thank you so much to the Nicoles. Thank you everyone who's here today. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to wake up sugar hangover from Halloween and see all these friendly faces from all different sectors. My name is Mariah Roberts. I'm Executive Director of County Park Friends. We work to increase equitable access to our county-wide parks and programs. And I'm joined today, as was mentioned, by colleagues from the public sector, from fellow nonprofit organizations, and we're all aligned on the essential value of a healthy environment as essential to community well-being. Our sector, I think, as you can tell by the attendance today, is passionate and connected. And we're really grateful for the opportunity to be here today and for that invitation. So Nicole, thank you for seeing that opportunity and inviting us into the conversation. We're really not here to present a finished product or a white paper or, a finding. We're here to start a conversation and to invite everyone here who cares about these issues into an active discussion. We want to collectively impact the well-being of our community. And so just think of this as the beginning. And before I introduce everyone, I want to just invite all of us, all of you, to close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath. And as you're just breathing and kind of coming to the present, I'm going to ask you to imagine a park or a beach or a trail, some natural space, maybe right here in Santa Cruz County that you love. And as you're breathing in and out, just think about how you feel in that place. Now go ahead and open back up your eyes, come back to the present. And what I'd like to invite everyone to do while I move forward to introduce our speakers is just go to the chat and type in one word that represents that feeling that you just had when you were thinking about nature. Thank you. And so with that, I am incredibly proud to introduce the group that we have here today. We have nonprofit and public professionals, all here to sort of start this conversation together. Speaking today, we have Jeff Gaffney of County Parks, Director Nick Calubaquib of Watsonville City Parks, Tony Elliot of Santa Cruz City Parks. From the public sector as well, we have Kristal Caballero of County Public Health. From the nonprofit world, we're welcoming Sarah Newkirk of the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, Kirsten Liske of Ecology Action, Jonathan Pilch of Watsonville Wetlands Watch, Felicia Van Stolk of the Natural History Museum, Tracey Weiss of O'Neill C. Odyssey, and Lisa Laurie of the Resource Conservation District. And I just want to say there are a multitude of other leaders who are actively contributing to this conversation, who are probably here right now, and who are making space for this particular group to speak today. There's a lot more folks who could add to this. And lastly, very pleased to be joined by my friends, colleagues, Aniko Millan, Brenda Gutierrez, and Yadira Flores. And so let's get to it. Aniko.
All right, so why is this report needed? Number one, we want to better understand the systemic value of the environmental sector to community well-being. So our first question is, what is the value of the environment to whole health?
And to Yadi.
Yeah.
Why is this report needed again? Well, number two, we want to better understand how our community funds this condition and where additional investment can support the whole health. So our second question is, does current funding match the value?
And number three, we want to offer clear and actionable ways to increase our collective impact and improve community health. So our third question today is, how do we fill any gaps?
So for the purposes of this presentation, we will refer to the social determinants of health. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services defined these as the conditions in the environments where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. So let's go. Question number one, what is the value of the environment to whole health?
So we are using our local SDOH model called CORE. CORE helps us understand how each of these conditions affect equity and well-being.
And we're not alone. CORE is our local example of how we look to measure these types of values intersectionally, but we wanted to compare it to a nationally recognized social determinants model, just as a comp. So this is Thrive from the Prevention Institute. This is a side-by-side of CORE and Thrive. We're looking today, I want to bring your attention down to that lower left. as in our conversations, we've been looking at these two particular conditions as defined in core: healthy environments and community connectedness. The reason we're looking at those is these are primarily provided in the public sector by our public partners at Parks and Open Space Districts.
Did you know the arts and culture expressions funding generally goes through the Parks Department? You may not realize that, but they often do.
So we're here to confirm that CORE matches up with Thrive and that they both find what we're looking at a value of 12.5% of whole health. So our second question is, does current funding match that value?
All right, so on that note, we're going to look at public funding for our parks agencies, and remembering that those two conditions, in terms of the public responsibility, it falls on these agencies.
Okay, so here's the current budget for our county parks partners. You can see that their budget is nowhere close to the value we've shown they have to our community.
Just look at that for a second.
Little tiny slice.
Teeny tiny slice there. Yeah. So we realize, you know, it's tricky and true. And here we are talking about core. This, you know, sparked this reality we're about to show you here is what sparked a lot of these conversations. Core is both a way we can understand value and we can start to work together across sectors, but it is also a funding model, as was mentioned earlier. And in the current cycle, as of June 7th, when this was reported, 0% of core funding went to our healthy environments condition. 0%.
It's not even on the wheel.
It's not even there. So you don't see a little green slice. And 3% went to community connectedness. So we put those two together and the word we have is ouch. Yadi.
So let's look at the Parks Department inside our community, our county. We are comparing the County Parks Department, City of Watsonville and City of Santa Cruz. Between these, they serve the majority of our population. You can see while Santa Cruz is closest with 10% all the way on the right. No one of these cities hits the value target of 12.5%.
So where do you live? Take a look at this. Do you live in Live Oak, Watsonville, Santa Cruz? Maybe type it into the chat where you live. How much money does your Parks Department have to provide you with services?
Are people typing it in? Are we seeing it?
Santa Cruz City, Live Oak.
All right. Yeah, there's a lot.
$95.
Yeah. All right. And so we wanted to see, okay, so that's, maybe that's how it is everywhere, right? So let's go to this next slide here. This is comparing county parks funding per capita, per resident, Santa Cruz, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. So you can see we are very low in comparison. It's pretty daunting. And here we have the city parks per resident funding. And so you can see it's a little bit more of a wide range, but certainly the two examples who we've looked at today are nowhere near the top.
Okay, so we have a video we like to share that gets at this issue and gives us seconds to share and in another screen. Bear with us.
Okay, it's coming up. All right, ready for some fun? right.
Cool. So if you want to watch that again or share with others, those cool stick figures, didn't know they could be so expressive, but with such a sad message. If you want to see that again or share it with others, the link will be in the chat. All right, so.
Coming up.
All right.
Give me 1 sec. I would just ask while I pull up the other slides, just chat in how that made you feel.
Your thoughts.
Anything that came up from that. We've had a lot of reaction once folks watch that. So as I'm pulling this up, that's
Was
me.
anyone surprised? I mean, we've been talking about it, but was anyone surprised to see the actual figures?
Yeah. So,
Okay, so how do we fill those gaps? Our third question.
we've been talking, as you know, over time. This is not new to many of the folks here, but today we've tried to sort of focus on 2 possible actions. One relates to the funding issue that we saw earlier, so increasing public funding, and the second is really aligning all of these incredible nonprofits with our public partners and just focusing our impact. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Director Nick Calubaquib of City of Watsonville Parks and Community Services. They have a measure on the ballot in a week that speaks directly to this. So Director Nick, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Mariah, and to County Park Friends as well for putting this presentation together. It's a pleasure to be here today. Again, my name is Nick Calubaquib, and I have the extreme pleasure to serve as the Parks and Community Services Director for the City of Watsonville. Just wanted to start out by saying that I really think the underfunding of healthy environments in Santa Cruz County isn't a new thing. This level of underfunding goes back generations and has really had lasting effects on access to parks and open space, especially for our more marginalized communities, particularly in South County and Watsonville. On average, communities across the nation have 10 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents, and here in Watsonville, we have 2.25. So in other words, our mostly Latinx and at-promise residents in South County have access to about 1/4 the outdoor space as residents of nearby communities. So this is very much an equity conversation, I think, as has been stated earlier in the presentation, and is one that has risen to the top of the list in terms of importance for our community here in Watsonville over the past several years. So just to roll back the clock a little bit to kind of do the lead up to Measure R, back in 2019, when the city conducted polling leading up to the renewal of its public safety sales tax, our polls showed that after school and youth violence prevention programs were the #1 community priority above all else in terms of safety and prevention. And in 2020, when the pandemic further underscored the many inequities that Watsonville faces, this really kind of brought to light that the disproportionate access to quality parks and open space that are essential to personal and community health and well-being and mental health were really kind of at the forefront here in Watsonville. Later that year, as the City Council developed its 2-year City Council strategic plan, funding for parks and recreation was identified as a goal in almost every single priority area of the council. And then in 2021, the city's ad hoc committee on policing and social equity in its final report recommended goals of increased parks funding and the exploration of the sales tax for exactly that purpose. So through all those different engagement efforts over these past several years, there's several themes that have really emerged. First is that there's a strong community desire for positive youth programs and vibrant park spaces throughout our community. Second, that a lack of sustainable funding for services that create a vibrant and resilient community is a true kind of need and priority here in South County. And third, that these services are often the first to be cut and have proven really to be the most critical during difficult times, things like economic recessions, global pandemics, et cetera. And then finally, that our community is ready and really understands that it deserves more and better parks programs, safer roads, playgrounds, libraries, and the like. So in February 2020, the city conducted a poll of likely voters that showed that 68% of respondents reported that they would support a half-cent sales tax, with the top priorities identified as really several healthy environment factors. So things like safe places for kids, after-school programs, the maintenance of our streets, trails, parks and playgrounds, and senior and library services really rose to the top of the list in terms of what's needed for additional funding. So in June of this year, the council voted to place a half-cent general sales tax on the November ballot, which is now known as Measure R. So I'm here today in my role as a public employee, so I obviously can't tell you how to vote, but I will share what the Measure R committee is putting out to the public and really, kind of sharing what Measure R is all about. So according to the committee, Measure R is for roads, reading, recreation, and resiliency. It really works to keep our tax dollars local to invest in the quality of life that our community deserves. It provides funding for street maintenance and roadway improvements, including pedestrian and bicycle safety enhancements. Creates safe places for kids to play and learn by expanding after school and youth development programs. Will help to repair, maintain, and improve aging parks, playgrounds, fields, and trails, and will expand services and access to library programs for youth, adults, seniors, and people of all ages. And if passed, this would really mean an additional about $5 million annually that would be available, largely for parks and recreation funding, which would essentially increase our budget by about 80% to really kind of deal with a lot of the kind of systemic and historic funding issues that were just shown in that great video that was presented. So I'll drop a web link for the campaign in the chat as soon as I wrap up here, if you'd like to learn more about Measure R. But just would like to close by saying that I think the strategies of public funding and the alignment of nonprofits and public partners aren't mutually exclusive. They really go hand in hand. We as public agencies can't do and shouldn't do much of anything alone and without our community partners. And more public funding could also mean more support for our nonprofits through both in-kind and financial support for that increased alignment that we're all striving for. So thank you for your time today. I look forward to continuing this conversation that's so near and dear to everything I stand for. So appreciate the time.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, thank you. And I encourage everyone to follow that link. So on that note, this is not an either or. We're looking at how do we all align together. So Kiko, I think that's you.
Yeah. So public funding, but solution number 2 is better aligning nonprofits and public partners for impact.
Yeah, and so just real quick, we're going to move fast because we really want to get to our speakers. I want to shout out specifically Jonathan Hicken of Seymour Center, Kirsten Liske of Ecology Action, and Sarah Newkirk of the Land Trust, who really jumped on this idea of getting a survey out and getting putting resources into getting some of the data that you're looking at today. They saw a gap in our understanding of this alignment, and so created a survey. And then we also shared that with our parks directors. So everyone on here, whether they're speaking today or not, is incredibly active in this space and has participated and is helping us move this forward. 17 nonprofits took part in the survey. Basically there's a ton of work underway now. There's deep expertise active in addressing these conditions. And so what we're going to do now is move to just giving you a tiny peek into what this looks like, what these conditions look like in action in their own words. And we'll be back because we can barely scratch the surface. Sorry, real quick, before we do that, just take a look at this. This is the respondents. And what I want you to, a couple just high notes. 100% of all of us who took this survey identify that we're working on community connectedness. I think that's really interesting. These are all sort of food for thought, observations. 94 in the healthy environments area. Every single condition is being touched by folks in this sector, except there's one area where all the parks directors said they do have work, and none of the nonprofits, and that's in stable, affordable housing and shelter. So just an interesting note to self, much more to do. Yadi.
The first condition is healthy environments, and our survey respondents shows a lot of active work in this area. So what does that look like on the ground?
And over to Sarah from the Land Trust.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
We got you.
Great. I'm Sarah Newkirk with the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, and I'm really grateful to have the floor for just a few minutes this morning. In September 2020, my family and I evacuated our home in Felton, California, because of the CZU lightning fire. The air was filled with smoke and ashes were raining from the sky. I'm sure many of you on the call have had a similar experience. I had to drive out of town because my husband, who is an asthmatic, could not. I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say that globally, environmental conditions result in over 12.6 million avoidable deaths per year. And while many of those deaths are related to environmental conditions that we've done away with in California, the example of the fires shows how even in our environmentally progressive state, the way we treat the land can have profound impacts on public health. Now, the extremity of fires in California is a result of climate change as well as forest management practices, both of which land managers know how to deal with. On climate change, we need to protect our existing open spaces and manage them for maximum carbon sequestration in order to support the work of emissions reductions efforts within our communities. Regarding fires, we need to manage our forests to reduce fuel loads and keep fire regimes within normal parameters. At the Land Trust, we do both of these things and more to support public health. We demonstrate sustainable, climate-friendly forest management at our Burn Mill Iron Forest property. We model sustainable agriculture directly adjacent to wetlands restoration at our Watsonville Slough Farm, showing how these two land uses can coexist even in our small county. We bring and provide public access through world-class trail systems to encourage healthy lifestyles at all of our public access properties, and are working to ever provide more and more access to more and more groups, like the ADA accessible trails we're building at Antonelli Pond. So in sum, environmental quality and climate change resilience is critical to public health, and the Land Trust, along with all of our nonprofit partners on this call, are helping the public sector provide these services using private lands and private philanthropic resources. Back to you, Aniko.
All right, thank you. So at County Park Friends, we have focused squarely on targeted community design programming. There's so many ideas out there, and the communities really know best. They know what's missing, and they may or may not know how to create something meaningful. And that's where we wanted to help with that. So we created our paid community mobilization leader role. We asked these representatives of their own communities, Latinx, people with disabilities, youth of color, and the Black community, what do you want and need? We worked together as a team, a great team, to build this programming. Then they could go back to their communities and survey and connect with their communities to know what was relevant and what worked. It was additionally very important that we built in affordability into our planning. So the second condition is community connectedness. This was the only 100% positive response area. Every single respondent understands this to be the core to their active work. And I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Jeff, you have 2 minutes.
Oh, you know I can talk. Thank you so much, Aniko and everyone. So glad to be here, and I echo so many of the thoughts that were already shared before me. Jeff Gaffney, Director for Santa Cruz County Parks. And I quickly want to talk about our strategic plan today a little bit and how important a strategic plan is. And you can see sort of this is the last time we did it. The first time we did it and the last time we did it in 2018. It was a 10-year plan. So here we are getting into the middle of that plan. So we're looking for input. And just to touch on a few things, what is a strategic plan? Well, a strategic plan is our opportunity to engage our community, to make sure that we are absolutely in line with our community needs and the needs of the people who we are serving the most or trying to serve the most. And that's where I'm going to make an appeal. First of all, our main goals, of course, that we learned from the last time that we did the strategic plan. And to be clear, we're just updating it right now. So we're sticking with our 2018 strategic plan, but we want to make sure that we actually have identified the right goals and that we're being consistent with those goals as we move through it over the course of this 10 years. But, great facilities, a strong organization, and awesome programs and effective stewardship. Those are the things that we really strive for as most parks agencies that I know of, and what we found out from our strategic plan. Those ended up being our goals. And so why am I talking about that right now? Well, something we take for granted sometimes, and I think everybody probably on this call is aware of, but I'll put a fine point on it. Our parks, our open spaces, our programming, they're so important for our health and well-being. They're critical, and never was that I ever seen before in my career or in my life as much as we saw during the pandemic, and how important and vital they were to human life and the people who use them, and the programming too. I don't know if everybody's aware about how many programs were put on by parks and county parks staff during the pandemic, at times when people were afraid to do that programming. So I'm reaching out to make sure that we have an engaged community and to make sure that we're getting out to the folks who maybe normally wouldn't engage, or people who are underserved, or people who either don't speak English or it's a second language to them. We were the first ones in this region that I know of to put our strategic plan in Spanish. And so we definitely want that. We want all of that input. We want to find ways to get to those people and engage them for our programming, our community, and get their feelings and thoughts and dreams into this strategic plan update. So I think I kept that to 2 minutes, maybe.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And we are a little behind everyone, so we're going to just ask you, I know it's so hard, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten, who's also representing Nancy Faustich of Regeneración, as well as Ecology Action.
My name's Kirsten Liske. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
I lead Ecology Action's community programs team of 34 staff right now. Since Earth Day 1970, Ecology Action has been developing programs that improve health and economic well-being for businesses and residents by helping them take actions that also reduce their environmental impact. We assist over 40,000 people a year with a strong focus on under-resourced communities. Over 80% of our program is in under-resourced communities, and we have programs advancing multiple core indicators. Our strongest contribution is ensuring residents have access to safe and affordable transportation options through providing e-bike rebates, providing one-on-one purchase guidance assistance for e-bike and electric vehicle purchases to low-income consumers, developing and activating community support for safe streets plans, and developing youth, adult, and senior bike and walk safety trainings. I'm also very proud to serve as a founding advisory board member for Regeneración, Pajaro Valley Climate Action. They are a leading climate justice organization that in 6 short years has risen from formation to being invited to Biden's first Justice 40 national cohort this year. Regeneración envisions a Pajaro Valley where people thrive in harmony with nature and sees both the climate and justice crises being caused at the root by our colonial inheritance, and realizes we can't solve either climate or justice without solving both at the same time. Regeneración trains community members to engage electeds and advocate for equitable climate policies. They were a key force in the passage of Measure D transportation tax, which is now implementing bike and transit solutions, as well as Watsonville City Council's rapid recent adoption of climate policies. This year's priorities include engaging residents in solutions through community art making, as well as continuing their youth leadership program, which supports CSUMB students and local youth to set advocacy agendas and supports those students and youth community engagements work for climate justice. Back to you, Mariah.
Woo! All right. This is the third condition. So this is a safe and just communities. Really interesting that 100% of our parks directors identify this to be a key to their work, but only 24% of us in the nonprofit side said the same. I'm going to turn it over now to Yadira and then to Jonathan.
Okay, we all can agree that everybody can benefit from access to nature. However, not everybody has the equal access to it. How we have activated the power of parks/nature is through this permit that empower underserved communities to use the outdoor as a community tool. And it seems like a naive action, but the reality is that folks question a lot when seeing groups of people of color in parks or nature. Therefore, we literally display this permit on our table, and it acts like a shield. So nobody could come and tell our communities, you can be here. And we have it in English and Spanish. And Spanish is really for the comfort of our communities, and English is the shield they are against it. Back to you, Jonathan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jonathan Pilch, Executive Director with the Watsonville Wetlands Watch, and want to briefly highlight 3 things that I think our sector does to promote safe and just communities. Firstly, as a community of nonprofits and government agencies, we are bringing out hundreds of community members every month to clean garbage out of our riparian areas, the wetlands, restore native habitat, plant trees on community parks, trails, and open spaces. And that has a tremendous value to community cohesion and developing a sense of a community that cares about itself and its environment. Youth programs, I think, is another core area. We focus on mentorship models, providing adult and youth mentorship for middle and elementary school students in after-school programs. That's an important aspect of community safety. These programs are free. They are, and they instill a value of community service. One thing that I think that's unique is having with a mentorship model is that it really instills a value of adults and peers that care and are invested in the success of each individual. And lastly, at Watsonville Wetlands Watch, we're very focused on developing programs that center equity, as I know many other environmental organizations are. One good example of that is our Watsonville Community Forest Project that's striving to move Watsonville from a 9% tree canopy cover to a 30% tree canopy cover, reducing heat stress and ensuring environmental benefits, air and water quality benefits for all in our community, especially those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and poor environmental quality. And driving that work is a youth job training program called the Climate Core Leadership Institute. That's a paid job training program developing future leaders and professionals for our community. Back to you, Mariah.
Awesome. You can tell we need like 3 hours. Okay. So next up, this is really key as well. This is safe, affordable housing and shelter. Interesting. A lot of work. We're not going to get to it all today, obviously, but almost all the parks directors identify this as affecting, they have to be actively working in this area in some way. 0% of us nonprofits. So it's interesting. And we're going to hope that Tony is here and able to speak to how the lack of housing and stable and affordable housing impacts our parks departments. Tony, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mariah. Yeah, good to be with you all. I've got, I think, 90 minutes on this topic, so I'll try to be succinct. This is a big one. I think this topic inspires a lot more questions than solutions that we have, at least among this group here today. But I think part of what we are grappling with across the county and within the city of Santa Cruz, especially in the park system, as you all know, is really widespread houselessness, homelessness. And so I think this topic of stable and affordable housing is absolutely critical and does contribute to people living unsheltered in our parks. Now, I want to be clear and not suggest that we are housing people through city parks and recreation, but we do know that there are hundreds and hundreds of people living in our parks. That's not housing. It's a hard way to survive, certainly. But with that recognition, we know that we've got to resolve the issue, but we've also got to think strategically about what is the role of parks and recreation in this area of affordable housing. As it relates to parks in particular, the impact of unhoused folks on our parks is huge. It's impacting a lot of endangered species. It's impacting our watersheds. It's impacting our land. And so there's a direct impact with folks living in our parks and open spaces. But what this really makes me think about is, strategically moving forward, a number of things from land use. How should parks be used in the future? We'll have a San Lorenzo Park redesign process that we'll go through here in the coming months. And we're already hearing from community members that San Lorenzo Park perhaps should be used as housing in the future. And I'm not saying that's the direction we're going to go, but those are the comments that we'll receive through that public input. We hear a lot about tiny home villages. Should we build those in parks? Should we have a park host in our parks? What is the role of Parks and Recreation in housing? But ultimately, I think this is, again, a lot more questions than solutions on this topic as we think about, again, the need for affordable housing, the need for just available housing in our cities and counties, and what that means toward displacing people, causing folks to live in our parks and open spaces, and all those environmental impacts that come with that. So a lot of work to do in this realm. This is a tricky one to speak to since we don't work in this realm specifically, but recognizing that we've got hundreds of folks living unhoused in our parks, I think it's an absolutely critical one for us to focus on as a team of nonprofits, of public agencies, and really figure out what our role is in this as it relates to the environment and ultimately getting housing for folks who desperately need it. With that, I'll send it over to Aniko. Thank you.
Well, and then quickly, our fifth condition is, of course, health and wellness. I'm going to pass this right on to Kristal Caballero of Santa Cruz County Public Health to share about one of my favorite programs.
Thanks, Aniko. Just checking you all can hear me all right? Okay, great. So hi, good morning. I'm Kristal Caballero, as Aniko mentioned. I work with your local county public health department, and I oversee our strategies to increase healthy eating and active living. And one of those strategies include Park RX. So as we've already heard loudly and clearly, access to parks and green spaces is a social determinant of health. Recreating outdoors is linked to a host of health benefits, including increased mental health, decreased chronic disease, increased social connectedness, improved academic performance for children and youth, and even improved maternity and birth outcomes during pregnancy. Park prescriptions in particular are on the rise across our country and here in our community, thanks to so many amazing leaders on this call, many of whom you heard from today already. So here, Park RX Santa Cruz County is a multi-sector public health initiative that convenes parks, healthcare, and community to promote the clinical prescription and promotion of park and recreation programs as key drivers of health, equity, and well-being. And without being able to dive into too much detail today, I just want to share that our Park RX work is designed for equity. It is equity in action. We are connecting systems and sectors who traditionally didn't work together to collaborate in new ways to connect those with lower access to parks and green spaces to their amazing health benefits. Right now, the Park RX partners include County Public Health, County Park Friends, the City of Watsonville Parks and Community Services, Santa Cruz County Parks, City of Santa Cruz Parks and Rec, Salud para la Gente, and Santa Cruz Community Health Centers. We are designing programs and collaborative infrastructure that we hope will contribute to permanent changes in our overall healthcare system that includes the recommendation and prescription and funding of free and culturally humble parks and recreation programs that increase health equity and improve health for all. So there's so much more to share about this exciting work. Again, it could be its own presentation in and of itself, but I'll leave you with a quick description of the photo you see here on the slide. So this is a Park RX program from earlier this year that was designed by County Park Friends community mobilization leaders called Wheel and B-Ball. And our local CCS program prescribed all of their youth who use wheelchairs to this program. And because it was prescribed, transportation was made available free of charge by the Alliance. And it was such a fun day and such a great example of Park RX in action and all the ways that it can increase access and availability of our amazing parks and outdoor spaces. And we really hope that this is the future, y'all. Thanks for your time, and I'll pass it back to Mariah.
My goodness, it's so inspiring. Okay, moving forward, lifelong learning and education. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Tracey.
Good morning, all. Tracey Weiss with the O'Neill Sea Odyssey. The O'Neill Sea Odyssey strives to create quality informal learning environments for elementary youth throughout Santa Cruz County. We are about creating equitable access for learning for youth, regardless of their cultural, economic capacity, and language spoken at home. We are just one of the many institutions in town that are creating quality learning outside of the traditional walls of the classroom. Environmental education is critical in creating pathways for academic enrichment, social and emotional learning, and building on lessons and awareness with each passing year. Environmental education can start in a backyard, in your local watershed, at a school garden, or out on the ocean with the O'Neill Sea Odyssey. Organizations work here to create and nurture a generation that enjoys spending time outdoors, understands basic ecological concepts, and understands how human actions impact our natural world. We're basically building the education we need for the world we want. Students participate in environmental education with increased academic performance. They are building blocks that serve as indicators that are critical for future environmental and civics engagement. So obviously we could talk about this for hours, but I just want to highlight the great work that we're doing in this area throughout our community. So thank you to many of you on the call doing this work. And I'm going to pass it to Felicia, who will talk about another aspect of this critical indicator.
Hi, yes, I'm Felicia Van Stolk, Executive Director at the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History. Also here to talk about lifelong learning. And the Museum of Natural History provides educational opportunities for people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities. And much like O'Neill Sea Odyssey, we do have school programs that are curriculum adjacent and support formal education. We also have other types of environmental education that take us well beyond the classroom, including service learning programs like our Earth Stewards Project for alternative education, high school students in the picture on the right. And these programs like this, and I know many of our partners have similar service learning programs, really build skills, and they support social emotional wellness, and they foster engagement among some of the more vulnerable student populations. And a member of this crew here pictured ended up getting a job with city parks. So it's a really wonderful way to build engagement and truly launch folks into a lifetime of learning. And of course, the museum also provides experiences for multi-generational families to enjoy nature and build positive associations with nature and learning outside of school, which is so crucial for lifelong learning as well. Aniko?
Felicia and Aniko, I'm just going to jump in really quick to ask our hosts, can we take a couple extra minutes?
Yes, go ahead. We've got some time for questions, but I'll just encourage everyone to ask some questions in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mariah.
Okay, Aniko. Or Kiko, if you're finding your unmute button, I'll just read it because it's quick. It's
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
no problem. You got it.
The seventh condition is economic stability and social mobility. So it's on Lisa.
Great, thank you so much. So a theme you've heard a lot today is that the conservation, preservation, and stewardship of our natural resources, be they on public lands and open spaces, on working lands, or on private properties, is really essential to the economic stability, health, and quality of life here in our local community. So back in 2015, the Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County, we set out to assess the economies of conservation and their relationship to the health and vitality of our community. And the resulting report that you see here, I'll put a link in the chat, is the Healthy Lands and Healthy Economies. It provides this comprehensive economic valuation of nature in our county. And the numbers documented in this report are really staggering. And at this point, there's several years outdated here. But natural capital in our county provides a stream of ecosystem services valued at $800 million to $2.2 billion to our local and regional economy annually. Ecosystem services are really those important benefits that we derive from nature, such as water filtration, carbon cycling, pollination, food supply, recreation, and many more. And as you can imagine, so many sectors of our economy really depend on natural resources within our county, including agriculture, tourism, education, arts and culture, all who in turn support a variety of additional local businesses. But really, in fact, ecosystem goods and services arguably provide the basis of all economic activity through clean water supply, breathable air, nourishing food, flood risk protection, waste treatment, and others. So without thriving nature, many of the benefits that we often take for granted and that we receive for free would not exist, or they would need to be replaced and modified at a really high cost. So, taking the results from the study and all of the work that we're doing here within our community, we see that the value of nature in Santa Cruz County is high and provides the foundation of so much economic activity, health, and well-being in our community. Investment in that natural capital and the stewardship of nature provides a really high return on investment. And greater investment in natural capital and its stewardship is really warranted in order to ensure the long-term prosperity and high quality of life for people here in our community. So with that, I will hand it back over.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. The final condition that's defined by CORE that we haven't spoken yet today is thriving families. So I'm going to pass it to Aniko.
So particularly in alignment with the Santa Cruz Black Health Matters initiative, through County Park Friends, I've enjoyed tremendously designing programs for Black families and other families of color, such as our Mental Health Monday hikes, our Healing with Horses programs, and our Full Moon Learn to Camp programs. These type of programs help these families reclaim the outdoors. We want them to find comfort in the outdoors. Nature heals, and therefore these families can thrive in nature. Felicia.
Thank you. I'm not going to reiterate the many, we've all been saying how much nature is associated with health, so I don't need to review that again, but I would like to call out that basically all of the programs here that are working on community connectedness are also supporting these indicators of resilience, because resilience, of course, is bolstered by a feeling of connectedness and community. And obviously, the core conditions are meant to be interrelated. I'll just call out one of the Museum of Natural History's programs that has a different approach than what we've addressed already today, which is community science. We have our CZU Lightning Complex and Community Science series, which is pictured on the right, which is a great example of bringing people together, not only to process and heal, but also to feel like they're part of moving forward and contributing to solutions, which we know is really essential for resilience as well. And I'll just transition straight into some closing, which is to say that coming together to move forward and find solutions is exactly what this amazing group has been doing. And I just love to thank you all for the opportunity to showcase just little snippets of the amazing work that is being done across the county. This group of nonprofit organizations and public agencies is accomplishing so much and truly serving our whole community in very powerful ways across nearly all of those core conditions for health and well-being. Many of us are working on indicators that are already measured by CORE, but we're also supporting indicators that haven't yet been quantified. We're filling in those gaps. And each of us, as we've all said, could speak for hours about our own indicators for success and the impacts that we are each making for the environment and also for the people that we're serving. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you all. That was so exciting to hear about. And Felicia, you mentioned how interrelated the core conditions are. Those dotted lines on that graphic are what you all have just demonstrated, and so powerfully. And we really appreciate that you took the time as a cohort to work together to try to map your own work onto the core conditions and to see all of those connections and share them with us. So we're really excited about that. We do have a few minutes if you have questions about anything you've heard. I know there was a lot there. We have an opportunity here to hear directly from the presenters. So do let us know if you have a question in the chat, or feel free to use the reaction button to raise your hand. And I'll also, just as you're considering that, Nicole's putting some links into the chat for the whole set of indicators that were referenced here, in case you want to see those on Data Share Santa Cruz County. And we'll mention as we wrap up that we have some events coming up that can help you explore those indicators in more detail. So, and Rose, you have a question about how often the group meets. So what does it take to do this kind of collaboration and work? Does anybody want to share that?
I'll jump in really quick and just thank a group of EDs or eco EDs that I am more recently joined. I'm sort of one of the babies in the group, honestly. Kirsten, Liske has been really sort of taking the head to get us all together here and there. And then again, as I think I mentioned earlier, Jonathan Hicken and Sarah Newkirk, the three of them really kind of turned this from an idea into getting the survey out. And I think it's a monthly meeting, but there are many sort of sub conversations, I'd have to say, and I'm excited to figure out sort of some concrete next steps to meet more and to invite more organizations into the conversation as well, personally.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for our presenters? I know there's some resources in the chat. We will share the slides. You have a link to the video, so you can follow up afterwards as well. Any other questions?
Can I ask Mariah or anyone from the group, after having gone through this process now and summarizing in this way, are there any clear takeaways or next steps for all of you in terms of where else or how else you might use this information? How do you continue these alignment discussions, or, you know, alignment with the core conditions? Any next steps you see for yourselves and things that would be helpful, you know, to continue collaborating with core around? I see Kirsten has raised her hand.
I'm not gonna talk. I'm gonna stay quiet because there's so many amazing people here.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, so I just want to say that the Eco ED group really got started because we had so many new EDs that came in over COVID and recently last year, and I know that's a high transition position. And so I wanted to make sure the new folks had the support of the more senior leaders in our community. So I was just going to organize a lunch, and then I created an inventory that showed we have like 24 groups that are doing staffed programming for environment and people in the community. So we started to get together, but we didn't really have a specific project. So we have been doing networking, that meetings, you know, so basically the group as a whole is loose and kind of still in quasi formation stage. So I can see Mariah continuing to lead on this core element just because she's at the center of it. I know Laurie Egan also has been really interested in the data side. So I think that's a partnership opportunity, is to really explore where can we have the county and our central data sources tracking some of the things. It's much more difficult in the environmental space because we don't have like central hospitals track diabetes for the whole community. There's no funding or organizations that are doing that in environment, but there are things we can track. And I think we've elevated a few today. And aside from that, the group is continuing to explore just networking opportunities and ways we can up-level philanthropy for environment, because it's at the very bottom, not only the funding that was pointed out today, but it's at the very bottom of philanthropy still, despite being in a climate emergency. So yeah, so those are some ways we can all work together that I can see. And thank you, deep nod to Mariah and to everybody for showing up so well today. It's super inspiring.
It certainly is. And thank you all. And I'm going to share my screen just so you'll see two data-centric deep dives that are coming up. And you will see notices about these as well. But Nicole, do you want to say a word about these?
Sure. And also while I do that, I see Gisella's posted the information in the chat, and then I'm going to launch the feedback survey because people might start dropping off soon. So we have at least 2 events scheduled. We're continuously adding more events to our Core Institute calendar, but the next one coming up for sure is on December 1st. And this is part of an ongoing series we've been doing in partnership with DataShare, where each time we look at a core condition, next time we'll look at 2 of them, thriving families and community connectedness, and take a look at some of the specific data in DataShare for those core conditions and have some discussions about what does that data tell us, what's missing, what's some of the other context or nuances that we need to be able to understand behind the data. So that will be December 1st. And then in February, our featured core condition will be healthy environments. And so it'll be another opportunity to look at what data is actually in DataShare. What does that tell us about our countywide status and aspects of health and well-being in that core condition? So in many ways, it'll be a great follow-up to today's conversation. And so we encourage you to stay tuned for more events as they get scheduled for the Core Institute. And it was great to see so many of you here today.
Yes, and thanks to all of the presenters and to Mariah for organizing everything and having the idea. We really appreciate all of that. If any of you are from another sector and thinking, I wonder how our sector could map onto the core conditions, we would love to support that. Please reach out to either Nicole and we'll work with you to make that happen. Thank you, Nancy, for the comment in the chat about how reconnection of people in the environment is so critical. It's a great wrap comment here. We appreciate connecting with all of you in this way. And we hope to see you at a future core event. And thanks for the inspiration, all of you. Really, really great to see learn about all the great work that's going on behind the scenes. Trying to make that more visible. We'll hang out for a few minutes in case there are any other questions.
Hi, this is Erica at Sabre Shores. Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So I was just chatting a little bit with Laurie Egan over at Coastal Watershed Council because we were, kind of looking at that affordable, stable housing, 0% nonprofit stat. And we were like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't seem quite right. And it makes me wonder if it's a product of the way the questions were asked in the survey, because I do remember it being kind of more of a are you directly working with these aspects? So I just wanted to bring that up because I do think that a lot of our nonprofits are either directly or indirectly looking at those issues or dealing with them. And just something that we were both like, well, wait, maybe we can address that or try to look at it at a different angle. Because I know we're not the only 2 nonprofits that are, either, I don't want to say dealing with it because that sounds negative, but it is a part of our daily work. Although we don't get direct funding or do direct work on making sure affordable housing is part of the process. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in there.
Elaine, are you still on this call? And could you speak to that, Elaine Johnson?
She may have jumped off.
May have jumped off the call. I mean, if you're asking me a question, yes, we have a tremendous number of nonprofits involved with housing, and I would think that this would be an aspect of what they're trying to create when they create housing.
Certainly. I wanted to say, I think you're absolutely right that, this was sort of a very generic, just, are you actively involved in this indicator? And again, it just went out to self-identified environmental organizations in that cohort. So there are tons of nonprofits, but what we're talking about is nonprofits who identify as focused primarily starting with healthy environments and then working out to other indicators. So, I mean, there are many nonprofits that work solely on housing. But in this case, I agree with you, Erica, that I think it's, perhaps, whether it could have been perhaps reworded, maybe like, does it affect your work or does it intersect with your work? And we probably would get some other, I think it's a really interesting conversation that needs to happen.
What a fantastic opportunity to collaborate on something.
Always.
I'm happy to hang out too if anybody wants to keep chatting. It's just, there's so much to talk about. But.
There is, and we do appreciate that this is just the surface of a lot more going on than we can do justice to in an hour plus, but we'll do it again.